Oh, hey there. Didn't catch you. Just on my way back from work. Doing the double shift, the real work at home, researching and doing podcast videos, and then you got the financial stuff. It'd be nice to find a good old happy medium infusion between the two. But yeah, I'm just gonna continue doing it like this for the moment and see what happens in the future. So yeah, Derek Barolacelli live from Brittany, France. And yeah, was excited to have Jasper on. He has his own podcast out himself called the Common Underground Podcast, and I had the pleasure and honor of being on that, not even once but twice. It's kind of steep down there. And was planning on talking about permaculture and alternative community type of stuff, off-grid living, because yeah, he's got a little side job doing that right now. He's holding down like 5 jobs at the moment, so we're able to squeak in some free time and stuff, even if we're a little fatigued from our day of expelling so much energy for X, Y, and Z. It is what it be, and it's a really good show, actually. A great conversation I had with him. We touched on a lot of stuff. Actually, conversation goes more around philosophy, knowledge, just ways of living and using language, linguistics, and some of the psychology behind that. And he has some really interesting knowledge in regards to mythology, whether Greek or Norse, and how it pertains to where he's from. So I'm not gonna spill the beans, but yeah, cliffhanger, watch out. Just kidding. Yeah. Anyways, without further ado, let's get it rolling. And yeah, honestly, sit back and take some notes, because he's gonna be dropping some names, terms, and subjects that are of pretty good interest, in certain authors for books and stuff. So yeah, take what resonates with you and look into it a little bit more. It's just inquiring about some things and touching down on some key concepts. Even keeping natural law in mind, of course. So enjoy. And hey there, Holistic Logistics podcast edition with the Jasper Rodenhuis, and yeah. A cool cat from the Netherlands, but yeah, in a special, unique province called Frisia. So yeah, Jasper.
Yeah, Frisia.
Yeah.
It's Frisia. It's yes, it's a province that I'm from, and it has its own culture, its own language, and its own climate, as it may. It's now a small province, but back in the day, it used to be huge, and was called Magna Frisia, and that like even the main meaning of the word Frisia means free people. And so within our culture, we're very free driven, although of course there's personal differences and there's much colonization from now we're part of the Netherlands, but that wasn't always so. And we stood for some things. You can see some historical events where even some Frisians conquered Rome, and the Franks who we fought for offered the Frisians gold or some possessions, but they said no. We rather have our independence, and it's even written down by the Holy Roman Empire, and that's even well documented, so people can look that up. But that's an indicator of showing how much freedom is part of our culture, and now less so because of colonization, like I said before. But there were many incidents in our history, and I would like to hope that one, like my co-host from my own podcast, Cheered, who also is from Frisia, and myself are some examples of people that are picking up on that. And that says something. Like, we're definitely going to talk about philosophy, I'm sure, but that's a very big drive for me, being interested in philosophy, wanting to make up my own mind and my own feel about things. And so I was always looking for some, yeah, so like I have deep pondering questions, but I was looking for some answers to find. And there were some things that I found out for sure, but we'll probably talk about some of those. But there's a lot more that I need to dig into, and so
Yeah,
the
don't we
emphasis
all,
is
right?
always on the process.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, like the amount of attention you've and digging you've been into, like philosophical teachers, you know, from the more known people like Carl de Jong, and Rudolf Steiner, and geez,
Yeah, well, Jung wouldn't call himself being a philosopher, although there was a lot of philosophies drawn from his work. He did follow a strict empirical basis, and so he really saw himself in his work as pretty academics, and there's a lot of people picking up on Jung's ideas. But if you read Jung yourself, it's pretty well. Like the way it's written down, it's like very high terminology, and it's not really like it doesn't when you read him, it doesn't feel like it's very much out there because it's everything that you can validate on an empirical basis, which science follows. And even the term psychology was invented by Jung. But yeah, I think it's good to mention also that I give online philosophy lessons, so that made me highly motivated to learn a lot about it. And I'm still learning along the way many philosophers that I'm not that much aware of, and so still digging deeper, as you could say, like I still want to read the book of Heidegger, Being and Time, for example. A lot of interesting stuff in there, but there's many philosophers, and of course there's two main philosophical streams, like the Eastern philosophies you have, and the Western philosophies, with having Stoicism and Hermeticism and these esoteric streams that you're pretty familiar with, even though Stoicism now has a revival and it's not that esoteric because the people only pick up on the practical side, and a lot of my students are also drawn to that aspect of Stoicism. But Stoicism had its own cosmology as well, and it's actually something that is really interesting and ties in with a lot of Eastern thought. So it's interesting if you dig deep into Western philosophy, how there are still correlations to the Eastern way of thinking, and I think that we're in a time of age where we do need to bridge these two seemingly different philosophies and seeing correspondences between both seemingly different fields. And that's not only in philosophy, but I do think like the ancients in Egypt and older civilization had a more of a holistic view where they see different fields tying in together. And I worked up my mind the same way. I hope that I see these correlations between different fields, because there's many. And so
yeah, and yeah, along with the Egyptians, there was also like the Druids up in the Celtic regions and everything, which yeah, I'm sure in Frisia they have similar types of traditional stuff, even
yeah.
spiritual practices. And in the last video you did on your YouTube channel in regards to permaculture and stuff, you mentioned animism quite a few times, and yeah,
Yeah, for
definitely
sure.
another
Yeah.
practice that is kind of more universal under different labels, if you will, sometimes. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but definitely like the Vikings had a very like for when we learn about the Vikings, it's mainly to monasteries writing down about the Vikings. But if you look into like the Norwegian, what they found about the scripture, they're written down in their sagas. You get more of a view like how they saw the world. It's even J.R. Tolkien knew a lot about this, is how spirits was very heavily influence in their world, like that Yggdrasil was something very living for them. So the upper spirits, or the elemental beings, and the dwarves and things, that if a person would say that today, they would be called crazy, but for them this was very normal. And they saw uh, a certain animism, like they saw everything as being alive, being possessed by these spiritual entities, and there were certain hierarchies with the gods, with the Olympian, not the Olympian, sorry, this is from the Greeks, but
Mythology, you mean?
yeah, I think, huh?
Norse mythology?
Yeah, yeah, it's like where
Odin
they're
and
like
Thor
the
and
hall where they sit together. I think it's Valhalla, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
yeah, yeah.
But they called themselves the children of Ash, actually, and Ash was one of the prime creators of the Norse gods. But this, to come back to Frisia, Frisia is heavily influenced by Norse mythology. Even the word Frisia and freedom and vrijheid comes from the word Freya, and so the goddess of love, and it's also love of wisdom and Sophia. These are, I think, a lot of philosophy is focused on the Greeks, but according to Oera Linda, which is a very controversial book about the history of Frisia, here it was written down that there was even that the Greeks were actually part of Frisia, and so what we attribute to the Greeks were actually attributed to the Frisians themselves. Things like democracy, equality between men and women. These were all things that we in Frisia already practiced way before for the Greeks did. But it's not like it's a very big topic, and so some people like jump straight at you like, no, that counter states everything that history is telling us. But
Yeah,
I
because
keep an
people
open mind too.
identify too much their ego with, history or his story, or, oh, my region did this, before yours, but might be on some ostensible information or facts sometimes, or dates and all that stuff. I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that already, like the Oera Linda was written down in a unique manner. It was actually written down in not the regular rune script, the Elder Futhark, which the Vikings used, but it was written down in a different form of letters, which had one having going like this, then the other one like that, and then like this. You have like 8 corners. And so you could form any letter of the alphabet. Not everyone or everything was used in this script, but I think like a lot of letters were.
Yeah,
But
you
this
sent
was
me that
just
picture, I believe, and I'll post this, up on the, like, a couple seconds before. Really interesting
yeah.
stuff, and that's where all the runes kind of follow that same geometric pattern, right?
Yeah.
Eight
Yeah.
segment
So
star,
the Hagal,
eight pointed star.
the Hagal is one of sorry.
You're referring to the 8-pointed star, right?
Yeah. No, the
Yeah,
8-pointed star is what the Elder Futhark is based upon.
yeah.
But
They showed me a really
the rune
cool
script,
picture there. I remember that's cool.
yeah. But also the Hagal, which is one of the mother runes, it's called. It's also where you can form all the other Elder Futhark letters. But both of these forms of language, and even the Frisians had their own runes in the Anglo-Frisian runes. But it was a little bit different in how the Oera is written down. But both of these runes, they're all based on geometry. They follow certain lines and certain curvature with the Oera script. But with the other one, it follows the 8-pointed star, like you mentioned. I don't really know the name of that type of star, but for me, was something that I'm also writing down in my book. I think that language is originated from more of the Norse Norse civilizations. And so, like, for example, you probably know the Hyperboreans, and the Hyperboreans was also written down by the Greeks, who referred it, but it had a meaning like the northern wind or something like that. And you had the Nazis who were heavily interested in the Oera Linda as well, and so this is why it got a very bad name.
Huh.
Yeah, Himmler, he wrote down like one of his letters, like the one of the gods has written down in Oera Linda, which is called Waldra. It's just like or original spirit of creation of everything. Like that's what we call Waldra, and even world, the world is coming from Waldra, from the same root, supposedly. I don't know if like any of these things are true. Like some of the things are hypothetical, and they set the Oera Linda away as being a scam. But to come back to like the Norse gods or those Norse civilizations. I don't know if you read this book by Olof Rudbeck, who was a genius uh,
Oh,
in the 17th century, if I'm correct. I'm never very good at dates, but he thought that Atlantis, and so these ancient civilizations that the Nazis were heavily interested in following, and they taught the Aryan races from there. But he thought that Atlantis was in Sweden, in Scandinavian language
oh,
country,
oh, yeah.
region. I mean, sorry. So that's very like
Oh.
that states a lot. I don't know what you think about Atlantis and stuff. Like, it's
I got a
another
lot of
very
thoughts
big
about that,
topic.
but geologically speaking, I mean, that's way up for debate, and I'm not really too interested in that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
more interested into really tapping into past life memories because I've had a really good friend mention that I'm kind of try to read and feel into my past life experiences, and she said that I was possibly in the Atlantean Wars when Atlantis fell. But yeah, I
Mm.
mean, like it's gonna we can look towards the Atlantic Ocean in regards to Atlantis, but who knows,
Yeah, yeah.
especially with
No,
the continental drifts and all that stuff, and how Pangea exploded pretty much, during that time, anyways.
mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
for sure.
You
Like,
mentioned you're writing a book, and it sounds pretty eclectic. You're gonna be covering a lot of subjects and everything, and I don't know if
yeah,
that's a good segue to kind of get into more of the topic we were trying to get into. But I mean, before you get into that, if you wanted to finish up what you were just talking about, for sure,
yeah. No,
you got some stuff on your mind, for sure.
I,
Let it
I,
out.
yeah, no, I think it's very relevant. I was getting maybe a
Yeah,
little bit too quick on it, but it's
very
very
good.
something like a big interest of mine. But I think it's very important because I don't think that the Phoenicians who are now attributed with language, who use language in a very different
Genetics,
manner, like with the yes, exactly, and so they used it more as a trading tool. They went to different countries and they traded a lot. But what makes the runes different is that it's not only for communication, to trade, to make some money out of you. No, it's about
oh yeah,
a magical form of language,
totally,
and
yeah,
language was for them something completely different, and it was used in a different manner than the normal day-to-day language that we use. So I think it's very relevant into what we're going to talk, because it's for me, what language is a mimicry of nature itself. So nature also communicates. Birds sing to each other. There are certain languages where they still whistle. So this is an example of that. But
body language,
huh?
body language, you know,
Yeah,
with all
yeah,
types of
like
animals making certain signals, and they got their certain colors that they flash in certain angles and reflections and stuff, and yeah, all types of different noises, and yeah,
hmm
it's a trip. It's a mind blowing thing just to think about for a good couple minutes or meditate on. Yeah, sure.
yeah, yeah. Oh, there's even some theories that even the Hebrew language is based upon the all ancient rune script. So what I'm talking about here
Oh,
can set a whole new paradigm across, because if we're just keeping assuming that the Phoenicians were the inventors of a language, then we're using it only to trade and to only make profit. But I think language has another much deeper function, where it can heal people if you give them some reflective perspectives on themselves,
yeah, totally.
and life and words can become more something, instead of being constructed where it has a predetermined meaning. It can become constructive, and the emphasis more on the process itself, which healing is a process. So if I'm telling people, like everything that I'm saying, like it sounds like I got to figure it all out, but it's all about applying these things in my own life. And so I can only do that if I feel whole. So the whole and heal, the connection between those words.
Holistic.
Exactly. So it's about, integrating it. These, you can keep on blathering about I'm gonna solve this, I'm gonna do that. But if we're really wanna create a different world, then we have to be accountable with the words as well. And so we have to become natural to what we truly are. And that's why, one of my videos, I talk about naturality, which there's a YouTube channel that really does it totally different than what I have in mind what naturality is, but that's always the case with words.
Yeah.
But it's for me, like, nature should be centered around there. Like, we have to center around nature, like we have to learn from nature. And it's not just that nature, oh, it's so perfect, and we have to just worship that. I'm not talking about nature worship, but I do think it's if you study nature deeply, and to go back to philosophy with the ancient Greece, there was one philosopher called Heraclitus, who was very different from other philosophers in that he didn't study anybody else, but what he did, he studied nature instead. And not a lot of things is still left from his writing, unfortunately. But the things that are written down are well, it's just something that, maybe we can expand about that. But I think it's very important because you're also talking about some videos about natural law, and just the power, and just the mystery that nature has, like I don't know if you know anything about like the Gaia hypothesis, which I also mentioned in that video. How much you know
Yeah,
about?
there's some, it's kind of convoluted or contrived or infiltrated, if you will. There's
Mm,
some,
sure.
it's kind of like it's got that new agey kind of head cage programming behind it, despite the initial good intentions, if you will, if that was even the case.
Hmm.
But but yeah, definitely. I mean, Gaia Sophia, like back in the days with the Gnostics and everything, they kind of reference that as what the Holy Spirit, more or less, Mother Earth, the whole divine feminine, the womb man, kind of.
Mm,
But
yeah, sure.
uh,
Yeah,
so much
and
more to
that's
it
an
than that. But yeah, of course.
yeah, and but you're touching on something that's very important, because language is often now it's used in a masculine manner, where it's about like articulation and using logic and reason. But to use logic and reason, you first have to intuitively feel that it's useful to do so. And so what comes
Yeah.
first is intuition. And so if we're just following our words and see where it carries us, then it comes constructive. But if I'm saying things that are already predetermined and already somebody said it for me, I'm just uttering their words, then it becomes constructed. And so there's a lid on it, like that's just what it is, and you cannot do anything about it. But I think some of your mixes was also in like life is what you make it. Like we can decide what words mean to us, but we have to apply action to do so, and not just uttering certain words, but also living according it and building a relationship. We were talking earlier about animism.
Uh-huh.
Relationship is key with words, and also between the masculine and the feminine, which I think the ancient runes were more like feminine based. They were more nature
Yeah.
based, in the form of mystery and divination, for example, that were used in, which
Is
is
that people
more
are going to
using the intuition.
internalize those meanings and use their intuition to kind of decipher that as well. And I didn't want to cut you off earlier, but I mean, you exemplified that perfectly in regards to the right, left brain hemispheres of, which one represent, the masculine is more of the left brain and the feminine is more the left. So yeah, more internal, intuitive with the right brain,
Yeah,
excuse me, feminine, and then yeah, more logical thinking and analysis with the left brain, the masculine side.
yeah, yeah. Like that's one of my like big interests within psychology, is these two hemispheres and how they work together. Because I think a lot of the problems in our societies has to do with that. I don't know if you know the work about from Ian Mcgilchrist, who did. It's one of the few scientists that dug into the double hemisphere, because he was
Rings a
like a
bell
lot of
actually. McGilchrist, you said?
yeah. Ian Mcgilchrist. He's like an English guy,
Hmm.
Englishman. but he is a pretty good, like he does a lot of research on the two hemispheres and how they work together. But he also states that language is actually used by both sides of the hemisphere, and also reason is also used by both sides of the hemisphere. But the way they're using these two lenses is very different. And this is something that I'm also speaking to, is that not you can use language in a constructive manner, just to say, you know, this door is a door, but in a constructive manner, like what is potential, what can we do with this door, then I have to use a more of a stimulating form of language which doesn't have everything with a lid on. I probably have to invent new words to create new possibilities with that, to do with that door, if you follow what I'm saying. And this is something
Totally,
that
man. And I'm like a step or a rhyme ahead of you in regards to, yeah, just like the playing on words, especially in regards to like the music we listen to with a lot of hip hop and lyricism and stuff, and how they can really do a double, triple meaning of the same word in a same sentence or phrase and this and that, and you just like automatically know what they're talking about, even if it doesn't make any logical sense from the left part of the brain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's I like, there's another guy, John Vervaeke. He talks about the dialogos, which I think we really, and that
The
ties in with
words,
like
yeah, logos.
dialogos. It's just a dialogue, but then like people have a lot of attributions to dialogue. Like for example, people think that dialogue means that you're speaking with two people, which is not dialogue. Dialogue means through the word. So dia means true, and logos means the word. And so through the word, we can solve certain issues. We can heal ourselves. We can create new possibilities. But this isn't not necessarily a social condition. It can be, and I think that's the beautiful practice about dialogos, is that we're needing to settle on and we can talk about dialogue, and it's also what my podcast is based upon. I think it's a very crucial point with regards to healing, to what is happening in our society nowadays, but even before, where it's contrasted with discussion. Like a lot of people discuss or they debate about their viewpoints, but within a dialogue, it's more of a continuation, or more of a process of participatory knowing. That's what he also emphasizes with dialogos, is that
Yeah,
there's a certain
with the
participatory
diagnosis, the way of knowing, and with the dia logos, like the way of speaking. Yeah,
yeah,
like
and
the
that
way to
participatory.
feel. So yeah, it's kind of like dia has a couple different meanings. Yeah, it's really cool stuff, man. Yeah, sorry to cut you off there. Keep going.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, no, it's I think it's very important that we like to deepen a little bit more about like the dialogue itself. What constitutes a dialogue? Like in the first dialogue, you have to speak on what a dialogue is, and so you have to make certain rules of communication. So you're setting on first on a certain common ground, a certain agreement. These are our commonalities. We both have blood in our brains. It can be anything, like we went to the same football club or whatever you're setting. It's very like these points themselves are very trivial, but for the meaning in the relationship between people, it's very, very important. And so first, if you settle that agreement, then you create a certain bond, and within that bond, you can create certain differences. So then you can speak about, you're a nice person and all, but these things that I don't really I wouldn't do myself. I would do them differently. And so you're acknowledging like this. I see that you're doing it this way, and I don't take it anything personal. Like you're a nice person, but like I wouldn't do that because, and then you can give your argumentation. But that's the whole intention of how you're presenting your communication. Like if you can say like, no, you're doing it wrong. Like you don't have that bond. People are like repelled and get repulsive, and they're like, the cognitive dissonance. Like you can still well present your argument then, we're already starting the first point with an assault. And so people, that's just psychology goes to a brainstem or primal form of receiving, and we're like, this guy could be a threat because he saying I'm doing this wrong, I'm doing that wrong, and I don't feel of bond with this person. You're not from the same locality, or you don't share like in nowadays it's all about, what do you believe? If you believe the same thing that I do, then already there's a bond, and within that belief there can still be differentiation. So that's what I'm coming to. But I think it's
find common grounds, with beliefs, like, hey man, do you believe in breathing?
Something like that, yeah. But even like breathing, it is something I think that's very important and also interesting to talk about, because when we speak, we use our breath. So we create certain mouth postures that give an echo to our voice, and but it's all, and that's even like in the Stoicism they call it pneuma, and pneuma is a life force, and they call it the breath of life, and so when we're communicating, we're using this soul potential, and then we're giving intellectual framing, and so we're uttering our words in certain manners. But I think that's the key in understanding real language, or real language. What the hell is real language anyway? But to really settle on definitions. So if you say like, oh, breath, what do you mean with breath? That's already dialogue. So an inquiry, because it starts with a question. Like every dialogue starts with a question, and not necessarily this certain statements, or that you can see. And that's why I think politics is a very big part of the problem, is because they're starting with an assumption. They think they're right, and so they have to convince the other person they're wrong, and this is the way to do it. And eventually they'll compromise on it bit by bit. But not in all situations that's ideal to do so. And also within life situations as well. Like if you're starting from a debate, then that means that you're already convinced, and it's you just thinking like, I need to convince the other person, because otherwise I feel insecure. I might be not right, And so that's some things that I see a lot around me when I talk about. Doesn't matter what it's about. Like that's why I think like talking about language is already one of the most important topics, because if we understand language in the same manner, then we can have a real conversation about, like many different, like even like I'm probably for sure that we're gonna talk about permaculture. But anything, like if we want to have clear communication, we need to know what words are,
Yeah, totally. And yeah, language counts for something. I mean, having labels and compartmentalizing certain things, and yeah, permaculture is defined as such and such, but there's certain different variants of permaculture, and there's even veganic permaculture, if you will, as well, without the aid of animals, even though at the same time we could all live symbiotically with animals, and especially even with bees and this and that. I mean, we have a declining bee population since how many years, right? And beekeepers seem to be keeping the population pretty up. If you ask, any beekeeper, I don't know if you know anyone. It's like,
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like that's for sure, man. The bees is actually something that can repair our atmosphere. So there's actually a very crucial role in our society, and they actually function as a colony, and so they're willing to sacrifice themselves to protect the whole. How many people will do that for another human being, for sacrifice themselves for a holistic way of living? That's, I think, like that's why Odin hanged himself of the trees, and how he got the runes itself. Like he sacrificed himself. And that's something I pretty feel like I'm doing as well in certain ways. I need to sacrifice certain aspects of myself that are in serving the whole.
Yeah, that's a great allegory with Odin. Yeah, man. Good call. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and Odin did everything for
Christ
wisdom.
Too, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, like even Jesus Christ is based supposedly on the story of Odin. It's no, like I can expand on that, but I don't know like which what you had in mind and hey, want to talk about permaculture?
It all depends on what's on your mind, brother. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'm reading this book. I got it here. It's in Dutch, but it's called The Book of the First Ones.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And it's about my province. Let me grab it real quick. But it shows different constellations on mountains that cities are formed. So I live in Bolsward, one of the cities in Frisia. And Bolsward is actually based upon Boel. Boel and Bol, they stem from the same etymological root. And so there's even like a small little town that I went to. It's not even a town, it's a village. And I went there, and there's a certain myth there that there were two oxes, and they decided like where the ox is gonna, I believe it's gonna sit down or something. That's where we're gonna build the church. And these two oxes, which are cows, but then, or these are bulls, but then like castrated bulls. And so you can see like some symbolism there connecting with this constellation, and that's just one. Like there's the lion of Leeuwarden. Leeuw means is Dutch for lion. But what it shows, this book is that these mounds that all the cities and villages are based upon, it's not just for functional reasons to get higher than the ocean when there's flooding, which is probably part of the reason, but it's actually serves a ceremonial function because they are all built on these star patterns. And now there's churches on top of it, but before there were churches, there were certain temples of the Vikings and our local religion. It's kind of like animism, but it's not that well known like what exactly our gods were back in those days. There are some things that I'm still finding out about it. There's some loose ends that you can follow, but eventually, it's something very interesting about this book because it shows like how much knowledge my ancestry, so the people that inherit this local region, really possessed about, and you can see that in many ancient religions how they follow star patterns. And it ties in what they eventually found out in this book. It's like partially fictional story, but the research that is done in this book is real, and also had contact with the person that wrote this book. But what it shows eventually is that they're looking for the Holy Grail, and they're finding out that the Holy Grail is actually not some physical object, but it's a star pattern as well. And they're able to connect the story of Jesus Christ and the cross, which is like here it's a kind of like a bird. It's a swan. Yeah, it's a swan bird. There's one city where it's formed like a cross, and it's like it's a swarm constellation. But it's also the cross where Jesus died upon, supposedly. So they do a whole measurement on that, and they're like coming back to Side Guys. You've probably seen that documentary, Side Christ.
Geez, like 8 years ago, or almost like 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like they're correcting a lot of things that aren't really well represented in there.
Yeah.
But it's some pretty interesting book. I'm really thinking.
Sure, but yeah.
Huh?
They brought up some great points and things to consider, but in regards to how so many stories were kind of told in the same way with a different flavor to it, almost, but the same type of archetypal figure, if you will, some kind of savior or Christed one, enlightened one, or whatever.
Yeah, it's very oversimplified, but it's often the case with documentaries. It's where just given overall view, but if you really want to go into like more of the specifics, then you have to go a lot more deeper than documentaries, which are just well represented. There's probably some exceptions for sure. It's like it's depending on which subject it's on, and if it's really something that's concrete, or like these things with ancient past, then you really have to dig deeper, and need to know a lot about astrology and about these specific civilizations, about their history, culture, context, everything. So it's a big thing. But I'm gonna show one picture of what's written in the book about the constellation. So this is the constellation that I'm born in. I live here, Bolsward, and I'm actually born here. Oh, here in this point. Oh, sorry, it's this one. It's called Witmarsum, and Witmarsum means white, and Bolsward, zwart means black in Dutch. So we have like a yin yang symbolism in there as well, but that's a small little
Cool.
detail. But yeah, man.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Frisia has a lot of things to offer. I only now, and that's something I'm probably going to talk about as well, is well, I think permaculture. There's a few permacultures here. I'm also involved in one of those, doing volunteering there. But overall, some things here in Frisia, we're close to the ocean. So if you look back in our history, we're often, sometimes we were called rebels and pirates and fishermen, and we were really a lot on sea, just like the Vikings were. And we also, that's why Netherlands is always very good in regulating water and making good ships. That's inherited, I think, from Frisian mostly, because we're already doing that way before that was even the Netherlands existing. But that's some things that people have to dig in themselves. But like regards to like the whole food forest and things regarding to permaculture, that's something that is still pretty new here in Frisia. When there's here a lot of farm fields, if you go around the cities, you can just see like 10 kilometers around you, because it's just totally flat and only farm fields. And it's just something that, like, it for me, it's not that much appealing. I like forest. I like go hiking in mountains and go into small little creeks, and there's a lot of birds and stuff, but yeah, I need some more than that. And I also think it's not good for nature, and there's a lot of problems that they have here. I sometimes get into uh some discussions with people that are or more of older generation, because here they're pretty stubborn. We're still really stubborn people. Frisians were, sometimes for good reasons, for sometimes for bad.
Yeah, it happens, man. Yeah, it's one of those old cycles with older generations just being stuck in their ways, and it's been like this. It's gonna stay like this at least until I'm the end of my days, type of thing. And anything outside of their norm is really like overbearing or too challenging for them sometimes. And yeah, but in perspective of the human potential, it's a shame, to be honest. But at the same time, it's like I understand, and
Yeah, but what the thing is that they seem to be very traditional, but the tradition that they're pulling back to, it's not the original tradition. It's something that's inherited by the Saxons that conquered, not the Saxons, the Franks that conquered Frisia and introduced feudalism, Christianity, and eventually when the Netherlands got formed, like the modernity, the colonialism of the slavery and all things that are attached to the to the Netherlands, excuse me. But uh, yeah, we were like more forming into trade and also living more regionally, and even like food forest. And like if you looked at the whole how our ecological environment looked like a few thousand years ago, it looked a lot more like swamps and forest, and there were almost no farm fields there. But because we built so many ships and we built all these houses, and we didn't really planted a lot of things back, due to the capitalist mind view, and also within Christianity, there's not a lot of room for nature and building a relationship. Like all the sacred groves, all the temples that were here before, they were all destroyed by the by the Franks, and even Saxony was demolished by the Franks. And so that's something that's still deep into our ancestral uh like feeling. Like it I still feel like, like we as Dutch people, we often go to France to visit there, and also was there when I met you. But like we like it there for vacation, but there's always this feeling in between Dutch people and France, and that's a little bit unsettling. Like we should look past like identities of countries. That I should state that, but like
Yeah.
I met some very great French people, but it's like culturally, like there's a lot of differences between our cultures, for sure. Yeah, like we like
Yeah.
Frisia overall here. We're very suspicious of everything that comes from the outside,
Mm.
uh, and I think that's like what a lot of people have is a, like all these like other they don't know like for example I met a girl in Peru, and I'm really close to her. I would bring her here to Frisia. There were people still look down upon that, because so there's always this in you have to keep the
Yeah, who are
bloodline
you? What are you
pure.
doing here? Kind of thing. And
Yeah, like
it's
they have
obvious you're
other
not
skin
from here,
color.
so they're kind of curious, like, what's your purpose here, kind of thing, this and that. I
Yeah,
thought that out here, and like I know what you mean. Like out here in Brittany, you know, not like they're all, not to label it like territorial or this and that. I mean, I think it also stems from a thing of curiosity, at least from over here. I don't know in your case in the region, but yeah, there's that, like, you're obviously not from here, so what's the deal, kind of thing.
mm, mm,
But it's
yeah, for
cool,
sure.
it's like not that big of a deal, at least for me personally.
No, 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 but I also think like some of these things are very culturally, but they're also like human own, like that is it's part of who they well what have they been taught. But I think like it's really like people cannot see past their memories. Like a lot of people,
Yeah.
I've reading this work of Gurdjieff. I don't know if you know about Gurdjieff. It's really deep stuff. But
Cool.
he what he says is that like a regular human being is a it's not even human being. It's more of a robotic, and so it based more. It's living on um like like compulsively things that they like learned before. They only are able to repeat that. Like we're very habitual, even in nature there's forms of habit, but there's also a form of adaptability and seeing possibilities on to create change. And that's hard for humans. A lot of people is that's very difficult because they're stuck in this habitual thought, habitual thinking,
Yeah, and
and,
that's
and
kind of
so
like base level consciousness, I mean, like this whole, running on reactionary impulses, if you will, and that's like more like the R complex of the brain, and yeah, going to animism, they're not identifying with higher levels of thought and that kind of stuff, and maybe they're more stuck in like the lower chakra regions and haven't activated it, up into the heart center, which really activate the higher levels, right?
mm,
So they can really get into that neocortex state of mind and really connect more to their higher selves and their soul, and have that override whatever ego issues going on within themselves, more or less.
yeah. Yeah, and like what he is pointing towards, and something that I really like. I read this book, In Search of the Miraculous, which is what written down by his student,
Cool
was a
title.
mathematician. Yeah, yeah, it's really like Gurdjieff was a very very interesting figure,
Huh.
but
Where's he from, by the way?
he's Caucasian, from the Caucasus, like it's like part of Russia, I think,
Oh
or
yeah,
like
okay.
in the south of
From
Russia.
the Caucasus Mountains, really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
Armenian. It's now, I think it's
Mm.
Armenia. But yeah, no, like very interesting guy. What he said is that a lot of people, like I think like some things I alluded to as well, but I think it's very important to know for people how much you need to question yourself before. Like we also have a lot of compulsion in, and I also have sometimes some events where I was very repulsive because of something was presented that I could not integrate at that moment. And so these are all like this work, like some practice that he mentioned, which I think is very interesting, is
Mm.
that you can say in any time, stop, and then you have to like totally freeze what you're doing. And then you can say that at any moment. So you're just talking with somebody, but the other person knows that you can say stop at any moment, and the person that has the authority can say that anytime, and they can just walk through, but the other person has to stop, or whoever is partaking in this play. And so people are just doing it, also always on the alert, and you can see people's dedication to the work, what he calls the work, which is the inner work. And so when people are like, I'm freezing, there were some instances where people almost drowned because they were so dedicated to freezing, and even when the water was rising because they were standing in some type of lake which was overflowing, they were still standing because the person didn't say, okay, now it's enough. Yeah, so like, so that's some things I'm really like even if in the education, like you can still see how much people are really taking you seriously. Like if you would say like I'll stop, and I need to stop and just also stop talking then, and also focusing all of my attention to my muscles and how to keep everything where they are. Also, don't move the eyes, just keep all your focus on standing still. Then you can come, there comes a certain form of awareness that it's like, okay, where's the other person now who's dedicated, and even if something happens, you cannot do anything about it because you're like in this freeze mode. And so that's some of the things, like even that's just one practice that Gurdjieff talks about, but I think it's very important, and you can do it in a certain setting,
Yeah,
for sure.
totally. But I'm sure you've seen on the flip, used in the negative sense, right? How you're able to snap people into obedience on a flip of a word, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. No, this is in context to teachers and pupils. So
Yeah, I know.
the intention is of teaching the other person. But if you're going to learn something from me, if I for example carpentry, you're coming as a pupil, I need you to require some dedication to really learning. Like if you come up there and you come 2 hours later every time, that doesn't show any dedication. So there needs to need a form of dedication between the pupil and the teacher, and this comes from both sides. Like I need to say things with full genuinity and authenticity, and really like the things that I say need to be functional. You can need to apply that, and so it also takes some dedication for me. But you can show this
The example
dedication
so
in
they
those
can
types of moments.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, like if you say like you stop, then and you just keep on walking, like whatever, then I know from that moment, okay, well, all these things that I've been teaching this guy doesn't take that much seriously because he doesn't even take this command seriously. So it's in that context. Like for sure you can abuse it, but and all this follows a certain initiation, and this also was in the ending, almost at the ending of the book itself. So there's not a lot of things you need beforehand before this context is probably set up.
Yeah, I mean, like I know the context. I was doing the whole devil's advocate, and
okay.
something came to mind. Like it starts with an M. The certain experiment where there's people that are hurting themselves just because someone said to touch something at a whim of their voice, kind of thing. And it can really, yeah, it shows how easily people can obey certain things. But yeah, being a free thinker is really important. But yeah, in certain contexts, when you're really trying to learn a certain discipline, yeah, that really sticking towards what the mentor is saying is pretty damn important, for sure. Like for me, example, and you at the same time, we both work in a kitchen a little bit here and there. And if we're not all on the same page, if someone's giving us an order and we do something wrong, what's going to happen, right? So yeah, obviously there's that strong communication and understanding, and just following through with what's needed at the time in the context. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, like to come back, I think what you do know about Gurdjieff is his 369 system that Nikola Tesla used, the Enneagram, That one is designed by well, it isn't designed by Gurdjieff, but he brought it out because he was initiated in certain esoteric schools, and
Oh,
eventually he brought this pattern out to the well, to more exoteric. Well, he has different terms. He has esoteric, and then there's mesoteric, and then there's exoteric. And so the mesoteric are the esoteric are people who are really listening and applying. The mesoteric are listening but not really applying, don't really know how to apply, and then the exoteric are not even listening. Like they're listening to an extent that they can give a name to it and like this is that, but they're not really have that dedication, really wanting to know what it truly is, because it does require some search and some genuinity and a lot of qualities and virtues that a human needs to possess before some things get revealed. Because initiation doesn't just go from people to people; it's also from life to person, and also even that's something that I've learned like pretty recently from plant to plant as well. So there's always this stage of initiation. So I need to be ready to really know about these next steps.
yeah, totally. There's required knowledge to really get to that next level, for sure. And yeah, actually, I've never heard it said that way. It's always been for me. Esoteric is more like the inner circle of knowledge that's more hidden and occulted, if you will. And then the exoteric is more that's actually available in the external world, right? But the mesoteric, I don't know where I would fit that into that,
Well,
definition.
it like some things that like I'm starting actually the book from backwards to forwards, but something that he mentioned before that is that the meso like a lot of people think they're intelligent, but they're only giving certain names to that's why I mentioned what constructed, like they're giving certain names. Oh, this is that. Oh, this is this. And I give it a certain spot. They categorize it, and I think they're learning in that way. But that's not really learning. That's just giving it a name and just putting it somewhere in a certain spot, but then not thinking about it anymore. And
Right.
so,
They read something, they kind of conceptualize it and rationalize it in their own way, and they're not really
yeah,
implementing it within themselves to better themselves and make themselves better and behave better. And
yeah.
yeah.
And
That's what you
you,
mean?
you can still know about the esoteric. Like people can
Right.
still just know from a very deep depth, big depth, like about esoteric teachings. But if they don't apply it to themselves, then they don't really have that inner initiation of really going through these stages of life where you can still like. That's what feel very drawn to spirituality, is that I'm not depending on anybody else for validity. Like I will experience it if it is true. I will experience it, and these are some things like this with Gurdjieff. It changed a lot of my awareness, and it's a book that I really have to reread a lot more, because it is it teaches such a depth that it requires like different life stages to really grasp at what this person is really saying. Because if we really want to speak to one person with real communication, where the intention is behind the healing, we have to take in consideration the long term. So we have to say things that there will be to benefit to the other person, not just to the other person, but also into context to the whole, so the holistic, but also on long term, and not just I'm giving you a candy which gives you a good feeling, but it's not good for your sugars and it'll actually deteriorate your teeth.
Yeah.
Like to give just one example.
But the analogy of the carrot and the stick kind of thing, you're
Yeah.
dangling a carrot in front of someone like, hey, if you follow this carrot, you're gonna get something later, and it's kind of like that whole false hope scheme, you know.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. No. Like there's so many. Like I always like what I always like to begin my questioning with, like if I'm pondering a certain questions, is what is actually most needed and what is most crucial. Like you can go into any field, you can learn about anything, but if you don't narrow it down to what is most crucial and what is most needed, then there are so many things that are interested but will not really be applicable and also be experimental, because that's always what I say to people. Like, sure, I have some form of natural authority, but I don't want people to follow me, because I'm living life on an experimental basis. Like I'm applying what I'm learned, but I'm feeling like I'm a pioneer in that, you know, like, and people do similar things, but they're doing it in their own manner. And that's for
Yeah.
me what spirituality is about. It's about this refreshment, this where life becomes experimental, where it comes the first time again.
It's the
And that's
journey,
that's yeah, for sure. And that's quite a journey, you know. It's something that, and I'm like, I don't want to present myself as a person that is totally following up to everything that I'm presenting even in this podcast or within every conversation. Like I'm trying
Yeah, no
to
one's a
do as much
know-it-all.
as
No
I
one
can.
has it all figured out, but we're all trying to. And I love your enthusiasm and motivation to keep at it and everything like that. Yeah, that's what's up. You know, like we're all on our own levels of progression individually and in, relativity to the whole collective consciousness and where we're at in this space-time continuum and all that stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
man, been loving what you've been saying this whole time. Yeah, keep it up, man. So sorry
Oh,
to cut you off.
nice.
But,
Yeah, no, probably something that you could put in the links for people is called pdfdrive.com, is where you can get free books downloaded. And
yeah,
I got this. No, I didn't get this one, but I did get a lot of books from there. So, like, we're living in an age, you know, everything is approachable for us if we really want to do so, but it always requires some dedication. And so if you're learning about any like particular field and not really putting in the dedication to really apply it, and which does require a lots of motivation, that,
and
you know,
time,
it's
and attention. This thing. Wouldn't you agree
attention,
that
exactly.
part of the society these days is kind of like this whole instant gratification thing, and then with the smartphones we get the instant information, the Instagram, the instant likes, and the instant whatever else that and yeah, there's like this popularity thing and way too much like, oh, we got the life hacks and everything, and you just push this magic button or take the magic pill and you got it all figured out and your life's good to go, and it's like shit doesn't fucking work like that.
Mm,
Bottom line,
mm,
it takes time, effort, attention, proper energy and focus, and yeah, persistence and patience at the same time. No one's gonna. We've been all been led down, these instant, quick fix types of things, and that's
yeah.
normally not the case. But at the same time, I'll just finish on saying that what you mentioned with things like priorities, right? Like we're learning of what's most needed, right? Like we have certain priorities. There's certain solutions that need to be drawn or brought towards the forefront of things, and like what is needed mostly at this point in time, and like people need to put more focus towards those things and in proper knowledge and action to make it all happen, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that's very important to add to that is like everything is possible when you're living from necessity. Like some of my first spiritual teachers, when I was 17 years old, I encountered some friends who were also into spirituality. I'm still like big fan friends with them. When I saw them again, like even you don't see each other regularly, like you're still having this good bond because they pass around like this specific teacher, which I still fall back to and taught me many things. But this guy is called Michael Grubb, and he doesn't look for any popularity or anything. But what he does, he doesn't talk about spirituality. He does talk about it, but it's not its emphasis. Like he shows what spirituality is about, and that's something that I really admire. You know, if people show me what they're about, that speaks to me a lot louder, and that's something I've learned in my couple of years from my own experience. Is that if I I can talk about many different things, and there's only a few people that really take me seriously in that regards. But if once I do certain things and I set an example, and I live from this necessity, then there's some moments where I surprise myself, and that's also ties in with the work of Gurdjieff, where the miraculous, the search for the miraculous, like miracles happen then, because we're capable of many different things, but it doesn't stem from our ego desires, and that's that's the want. I want this, not I need it, but I want it. And why do you want it? There's different reasons. Maybe we can go into that. But that's something, because if I want a certain girl and you want that same type of girl, there might be a conflict existing there, and that's the whole like sexuality, which
There's
is
always
heavily
going to be
suppressed.
that, though, like, how many
Yeah,
billions of
man,
people
but
are there in the
people,
world,
what if people want what is needed, and what type of world would we live in then? Like, I think that's what dialogue is about, is falling on this necessity. Once we can talk about necessity, then I want to be right, you want to be right, you want to convince me, I want to convince you, you want to do this solution, I want to do that solution. But within a necessity, that's the solution, because the necessity is not stemming from me, not because I want to, but because it's actually like, if you look at everything holistically without any bias, then you will recognize that this is the most needed
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah, totally.
uh,
And this is what I was talking yesterday to a really good friend for like 4 hours yesterday, and she's really into the whole, living off grid, and she's, seeing a good amount of, and heard a good amount of, these alternative communities and this and that, and people coming together for the greater good, more or less, and trying to figure out what's needed and this and that. But the problem is, like, not everyone's on the same page, whether, consciously, spiritually, intellectually, whatever,
mhm.
experimentally. And then you got the mixture of, whatever group of alpha males and this and that, and people weighing in of what they believe is most needed for the situation, and this and that. And it's really hard
Yeah,
to strike that fair balance sometimes of, polarizing. I wouldn't even say it's not even about polarity, but just differing opinions of what is, you know, the best option for the best situation at certain times, and all these trivialities and this and that. Sometimes it's like, yeah, as far as, like alternative communities and or
yeah,
not,
I,
just like even relationships, like just being
yeah,
between two people, it doesn't matter.
yeah. No, but I like, if you like what I'm speaking about with the needed, it's not uh propositional. Propositional as supposition.
Proposal?
Propositional,
No, I think you
pre-propositional.
said,
No,
yeah,
it's
right.
pre-propositional.
Yeah.
Knowing, like, if I presuppose this is what is needed, then it stems from my intellectual origin. But if it's participatory, so I know that what is needed might be different from moment for like today it's different from tomorrow, and it even shifts within moments from person to person, and I'm not filling in it myself, but it comes from a source that is deeper, and that's existing actually in between. Like, if it's in a context with another person, it's existing in between us two. um, and in regards to ourselves, it's something that is in a space that's not it's not local. Like, you cannot find it in our brains itself. And it's not based upon things that we were learned. Like, some of the things that is already, like, some things that I need to add to that is that knowledge is limited. So we can, like, you did many research, I did a lot of research, there's academics, there's a lot of people that have different viewpoints, and everyone is educated differently. But if you acknowledge that knowledge is limited, that what I experienced, even like I had some transcendental experience, some very like miraculous experiences, which really shows to me that there's a lot more possible.
Yeah.
Even that is still limiting, because there's a lot of things that I didn't experience, even in paranormal sort context, but also in just normal mundane life, that I didn't experience. So if I don't have the capability to form a certain image, using the imagination to create an empathetic image of what could be possible, then like fill in the blanks.
Yeah. I feel you, man. And what do I want to say about that? I was writing something down I want to touch back on earlier, but yeah, as far as like having these like mystic experiences, you know, synchronistically, or you know, having some kind of like serious, you know, frequency shift, or you know, vibratory awakening kind of stuff. That experience in it of itself and the knowledge of that, I mean, it's hard to articulate that and really understand what the hell fucking happened. Sometimes, you know what I mean? It could take years, you know, and like if you don't find the right mentor, if you can't really tap into it completely yourself alone, you know, and really decrypt to what really took place within yourself. I mean, I'm speaking personally at the same time, but yeah, man.
Yeah, no, it's a constant unfolding, you know, like we constantly have to question our self concept. And so there's this guy who makes Japanese movies, Japanese like they're big movies. It's a Japanese name, so don't ask me the name precisely. But he made this film called Ran, Ran, and when he creates a movie, his contemplation, his question that he puts forward to base his stories upon is, why can't people live happily together? And so he ponders this question, and then he creates this story, this narrative of why that is happening, and what is underlying under there. What you can see in this movie, like this person has this belief of, my parents, of my sons, they would never fight each other. They would never. They're so like everything looks perfect, and they're such great people. And then there's these wars going between later, like with his sons, and one son that he didn't like, he was sent away, and he was totally mad at this son, and the son is told him like, these sons are gonna fight, and no, you're crazy, go away. And then the sons, they're fighting, and everyone dies around him, and he still doesn't believe. Like he's still, nah, my sons, they will never fight each other. Like everyone around him is dead, and he just holds on to this belief until eventually he like there's no other ways that he can deny anymore. Like he just has to face the reality, and then he comes into like this big shock, and like from that moment he actually is already dead, but he's still like living in his corpse, like he's still moving around, and has this
Oh,
whole
yeah.
drama going on.
Mm.
But like he cannot handle that shock of like, okay, things are totally different than I thought they were before. And that's, I think, it's very important, is that we can refresh our self identity, that we can say, this is who I am at this particular moment, but in another moment it might be completely different. So if I'm flexible enough, then I can move with people. And this is something that I'm doing in my daily life, like doing many different forms of work, is I'm working with a lot of different types of people, like old
Yeah, man. How
people.
many jobs do you have at the moment? Can you tell
I
the
have
audience how many?
five. Yeah, I have five jobs. Like
Bro.
people are trying to measure people are trying to measure how much value I bring into the world and how much status they can
Bam.
apply to me. Like it's difficult with me, like I do a little bit of kitchen, I do a little bit like a cleaning job, volunteering for permaculture, like I mentioned before, and I give philosophy lessons.
You're
I
shining
also
your light
help
in many different areas, man. That's nothing but applause from this end, man.
yeah,
Bravo,
listen, like
man. And it's not about the
that.
financial value as you're alluding to, man.
No.
Straight up. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Like that's something that Ian Mcgilchrist, to come back to him, is also mentioning, is like we need in our society a lot more polymaths. So people that know a lot about different forms of different types of fields, instead of
Mhm.
everyone's highly specializing. Which he isn't against specializing, by the way, but he says like there's just the emphasis on polymath, being aware of multiple subjects, will already enable you to see correlations and see more of the bigger picture. And he spoke about the two hemispheres and how those work together. But I would really recommend this book. It's called Master and His Emissary, and he says that the right brain is actually more important than the left hemisphere, which is more of like the left hemisphere just more do more of this. But why I also have 5 jobs and do many different things is to keep this right brain active, to constantly, okay, now in the kitchen I have to function completely different than working with old people. You can just slow down and just have a cup of tea with them, and you talk about, and you slowly just work. But in the kitchen, it's just, you work in the kitchen as well. You have to work really hard, and at certain moments you have nothing to do. And in the volunteering job, I am
Yeah.
more working with plants and talking more deeply with the person that lives there. Is more like on the spiritual, also conspiracy side of the perspectives, and also, yeah, talking with her as well about certain matters. And then the philosophy lessons, they're highly intellectual. We'll have many different types of requests. Sometimes it's helping people with their, like, preparing for exams, to people that have certain life issues, and also had certain artists or scientists that came, like, they were totally done with science, because it's just, with science there's this analytics, but a philosopher is more of an artist of concepts. That's how Rudolf Steiner put it. And so there's always an open end to it. Like, nothing is really conclusive. There's everything, you can question everything. And I would emphasize questioning, especially yourself, because we form certain narratives that explains the world around us. But before philosophy, we had mythology. Mythologies give certain stories of how things were, why things are the way they are, and people were just fine with that, and they could function within that. But we need, like, what science is based upon is natural philosophy. So we're looking for natural answers to everything, and that's already creating a certain lens of how you can explain things. But within philosophy, the emphasis is more on questioning. Like, it's an art form of questions. Like, a child is already a really good philosopher, but later
You're
on it
always
just
asking
learns, like,
why.
yeah, yeah, it's like even scientifically stated that, like, a child has like 5,000 questions per day, and like
Only?
an adult has about like maybe 20 on a regular basis. So they did
Damn.
certain studies on that. Like,
Huh.
man, we need to ask a lot more questions, and I think in a good conversation you're left with more questions than answers, and I'm fine with that. Like, I like having certain answers, but I'm holding it very loosely, and maybe like something we can go into as well. Like, there's a certain fixed aspect to creation, the natural laws, things you can fall back to, that are just there because they can experience them.
Yeah, somewhat
But
immutable
there's
principles for sure, man.
Yeah, but then there's also the dynamic, and that's also what Ian Mcgilchrist is emphasizing, the dynamic side, which in Christianity called the Holy Ghost. The dynamical aspect, and also Heraclitus was, he had this famous statement of, you cannot step into the same river twice. Like, life is always changing. So if you come up with an answer where there's no set of mystery left, then you're just explaining miracles away, just like Trans McKenna put it. Like, just give me one miracle and we'll explain the rest. That's the attitude that science has. But for me, like, I'm pretty settled if there's a lot of mystery things to explore. Like, I'm now doing a study for becoming a garden architect, an ecological garden architect, and I was doing this proof, this like first free lesson, like an introductory lesson, and they were saying in there, like, there's 400,000 types of species. I don't agree with those numbers, by the way, because I, like, even in the Amazon, there's a lot of plants that aren't even discovered yet. So it's a an estimation, but still, if you have 400,000 plants to study, that will mean that if the rest of your life you would study plants, that there's, well, I'm not that good. Like, depends on how old you are and how much life you have left, but I think you're really, every day there would be like a 10 maybe more type of plants that you can study. Like, there's always things you can learn. That's what it comes down to. And that's also why I'm interested in learning so much,
Mhm.
and also in this particular career. Well, I wouldn't say it's just a career, but this particular path.
Yeah, it's a great path, man. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so yeah, no, definitely different, doing a lot of different things to keep my mind active, but also what I was saying about the right hemisphere uses a lot more context. So the context within a kitchen, within gardening, within working with other people, the context changes, and that's the dynamic aspect of life. That's always changing, and it's always flowing. And so if we have a certain mindset within reality, like this is the way things are, that like within natural law that functions because those things are really there. You can validate by your own life and really perceiving these laws in principalities. But a lot of things are still left to be questioned, and I think that I need to put some emphasis on that because a lot of people. And that's also why I sometimes presented to you certain paradoxes, and also Heraclitus is known as a riddler, as a person that had really paradoxical philosophies. Because if you study nature very deeply, there's a lot of paradoxes in there. There's a lot of, and even life itself has a lot of paradoxes and ideologies. They're not good with paradoxes because things follow into a certain narrative. They're like, these are the things, the way things are according to my narrative. And if they're different than what I described the narrative to be, then they're false. But sometimes there's occasions where things are and they aren't, and it's depending
There's another
on.
way to do the same thing, and you'll get this same or similar results, more or less. I guess, right?
What do you mean with that? Can you explain that?
Well, just there's more than one way someone can do something and get the same results. When the one person that said like, oh, this is the only way you can do this, but then someone comes
Yeah,
up like, you can do it like this, man. It ain't no thing. You're like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, kind of like
exactly.
the whole permaculture ideas and stuff. I mean, there's several different ways we can go about doing this and live symbiotically with nature and be more harmonized as a society within the natural world, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And like with the permaculture, it's not an absolute answer. Like it's just gives you some initial steps towards living more harmoniously with nature, but it still works within this framework that's applicable for everyone, regardless of their ideology, of their background, because it's just something that, like, the results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
But if we really want to resolve conflicts, we really have to take it a step further than just providing food and living more according with nature, because a lot of people still have this view that nature also is centered around conflict, that there's conflict between predators and prey. But if you
Yeah.
look into nature deeper, it's not competition, it's not conflict, it's collaboration. But that first needs to take in the holistic view. So I think it's very important that people keep questioning themselves, and they are taking into account that they're connected with every sentient being around them, and also even non-beings. Like it's all connected. And then that's also what Michael Grubb was teaching, the teacher I was talking about earlier. It's like we're all connected, and he was showing a true demonstration how that is. And what he did was doing psychokinesis, so psychical powers with the changing molecular structures in clouds, for example, and making it rain. Or there's one of the most popular videos of him is doing leaf tornadoes, where you can change the wind and make certain
Oh,
spirals. And
yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of people will like, this is a completely new paradigm, so a lot of people will just dismiss it. But what he was saying, and also, like, if you look at the comments, he responds to almost every comment, and he explains like how this is possible.
Mm.
But it requires a certain transformation within a person. And so for me also, like, knowing and learning, it's a transformation, it's not information. I'm not learning it to utter it on an exam, or to say it at the right moment at the right time. No, I'm doing it for self transformation, to change my awareness of life. And really, like, if you know all these forms of plants and you walk around somewhere, it's not just, oh, there's some plants and there's some grass there. No, you exactly know what types of plants they are, what they need, and also how they can help you and benefit you, and how they benefit the environment. And so that's why I think language is still so important, but it shouldn't be based upon technology, but but it should be based on nature itself and the mimicry of that. So I'm hoping that people will learn more about nature and not just the hermetic principles, which are very important for people to know. But it's the same thing with astrology. Like a lot of people with astrology, they read a lot of papers on their screen and say, "Oh, this is happening today." But how many of those people are actually looking into the stars and actually following those stars? And the same thing applies with natural law. Like a lot of people know about those books, but how many people of that actually go into nature and study? Like if you can see ants, for example, digging big holes and there's a lot of sand on the ground. That's an indicator that will rain 1 or 2 days ahead.
Mhm.
So those are certain set of laws which are setting certain behavior. So these are things you can validate. But that's the thing. Like I was thinking about. I was walking last and I saw this and I thought, like, yeah, we're probably going to talk in this podcast about natural law, and that's something I want to emphasize, that it connects back with something that's really out there and you can connect with that, and that's that animism. Like that's that knowing, that recognition that everything is alive and you should be appreciative and respectful to everything that we encounter, and that's with regards to humans, but also to other sentient beings and spirits.
Yeah, man. The web of life. It's a wouldn't say a sticky situation, but it's been harmoniously interconnected and on a multitude of in a multidimensional way, if you will. And yeah, we could talk about elementals as well,
Hmm.
and they're part in it, even though I don't have a whole lot to say about that, because yeah, still a
Well,
new concept to me. But yeah,
yeah,
it's
no,
incredible how
I
the world works, and yeah, it's so almost like a miracle in itself how things operate and stuff. We're living in this, world, how many miles from the sun, and how the elements create oxygen for us to breathe, and the beautiful shades of colors that we get to see every day from the sky to, all the different types of plants and dirt and earth and everything. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, it definitely is, and there's a lot of precision in life itself, and there's a lot of mathematics in those precision as well. So that's why all those fields that are connected. Like even like where we're talking about language, I believe language is based on geometry. Geometry is based on mathematics. Mathematics is based on nature itself. And so there's a certain symphony that we can experience, and uh, the whole, like my whole emphasis, what I found out was the revelation of the truth, a word you cannot longer say in our society nowadays, but the truth is found in the search itself. So it's that if I say I know, then I already stop myself from learning. Like I have, my first no is that I don't know. That's the first thing I say. So I don't know. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to appreciate. I'm willing to be attentive, but I'm open for discovery. And for me, it's more about the process of finding out. That's something I'm really enjoying about learning about life. My mantra is love learning about life. And in difficult moments, I learn to love life. But it's always this appreciation of life itself and then the sad mystery that surrounds me. And I'm always open and I'm always aware that there's a lot of things in my world that I don't know. And that's very important. If you're truly call yourself like a intelligent human being, I think you should be aware that there's a lot of things out there you're not aware of. And so, even I don't know who said this practice, but there's a certain practice if you think about things that's least relevant to you. So that could be like a black dot in space and just ponder on that. Like that is already gives you a certain viewpoint of, like, how uh it's like there's in philosophy we call it the void. It's a space between stars. In science they call it dark matter. But is this empty space? Is it truly empty space, or are there even atoms and certain living entities that we cannot perceive? And so there's even things to ponder on that, even though it might not sound relevant. But it was something that Soren Kierkegaard said, is that humans are the balance between relevancy and potential. So I think to step outside of our ego, to see beyond our ego, beyond our own limitations, we have to step outside of to seeing what is relevant for us, and step in this field of potential. And that's hidden within that void, which I was describing. I was just taking as an allegory. You can think of
Yeah, I
anything
kind of
else,
took
but
it as that, yeah, sure.
yeah. But then the key, the whole work is making it relevant. So why is that, like, seemingly somewhere out there, somewhere in space, has anything to do with what I'm doing right now? And that's the practice, is like making everything eventually relevant. So this
Yeah, and can
potential
we
field, bringing it to,
actually find any kind of perspective that, is from there looking down upon us, right now at the moment, kind of thing
yeah,
as well,
exactly. And that's the as above, so below, you know.
yeah.
Yeah, because like the empty
Huh.
space that's out there is also within ourselves, you know, like that's the depth that every human beings have. Even the brain is the most complex system in the whole of the universe. So how is the universe not more complex than our own brains? Like,
Ha!
how does this work, you know? So I don't know, and there's so many things out there that are fascinating, and yeah, for now I'm digging into the permaculture because I do think it's important to me. Like, what is something that's relevant right now? And there's a lot of deserts, a lot of like here, what I mentioned with the farm fields. And there's less biodiversity. There are certain plants that actually form a certain problem, of being a threat for the environment. They have like a certain red list of, because they're so dominant, they can like conquer other plants. So those need to be like, I think, I don't know what you think about this, but I think a very big part of us human beings is also being a gardener, and so taking care of the earth.
Yeah, totally. Hmm.
And that's the,
And what are we
yeah,
doing right now? Because we were talking about this earlier, right? And how, you drove by, fields of the same, industrialized, crop fields and this and that. It's impressive at the scale of, how they've made that, but at the same time, it's kind of ugly. It just looks out of place. It's not something organic here, something that, nature created by itself. Kind of, it's just like really intensive man or human intervention of nature to fulfill its quote unquote needs due to, whatever economic agricultural demand at the time, kind of thing, and what's the most profitable sometimes, or what's the best crop in the best region under the best
yeah.
weather patterns, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, and that's the mentality. Even though like food forests, that's something I really want to pursue, like concretely. Like, to think like philosophy is very important, but it's an initial step. You can bring it into any field, but I think in regards to agriculture, which is facing a very big problem, like here in Frisia, it's one of the best regions of agriculture in the whole of Netherlands. A lot of
Wow.
like especially milk is one of our, one of our big exports.
Huh.
But eventually this soil is getting worse and worse because it's like gets dried up by the sand. Like, there's still, of course, grass, and there's grass plants, but it's only one type of grass, and they're cutting this grass every time, and so there's no insects, and so almost no microorganisms,
Yeah,
because they
yeah,
don't
yeah,
get
yeah.
any compost. They get a lot of manure, which of course feeds plants as well. But if you don't get leaves and sticks and other types of nutrients that the plants need, then you need to uh, um, need to let the cattle move enough. So if you have enough big enough space, it can still be durable. But eventually, you get just the quality gets less and less because like the soil. It's like in the beginning, it used to be like this because of the trees, like falling leaves on it, layers and layers and layers. But now it just
Yeah.
gets thinner and thinner because you get
Mm.
less and less soil because there's no cycle that's getting into completion, which nature
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
And now, like, there are some movements with agroforestry where there's trees and farm fields combined, that will be a part of agricultural solution. But then another, it's a step further, is without the well, you can use chickens or you can use goats or smaller animals, but that's the forest, the forest, food forest. And there's a few food forests here in the Netherlands. In Frisia, there's only one, but I'm hoping that this will be the future of the agriculture itself, because there will be space of completion. And there's a certain things you need to know. You need to set up a certain design. There needs to be a certain balance where first there's a lot of support trees, and then there's only a few fruit trees, and eventually you can get more and more. There's a, like, if people like in the comments are interested, people that watch this and are interested, then let me know. I can always send some sources of this, because there are some specifics that needs to be known, like the percentage and how this needs to be done. And it's something that I'm still pretty new to myself as well, and I didn't put it into practice yet because I didn't have the opportunity to do that yet. But I'm hoping that in the future I will be working with that, and will not solve everything, of course, but it will solve many different things. One of them being, we know where our food comes from. There will be less trash.
Yeah.
Trash is a word that humans invented, but nature doesn't know it. It reuses everything. And so, people know where the fruit is coming from. They grow a bond with it. Yeah, everything doesn't follow that logical narration in that there's a straight line. You follow the straight line, and there's a row of apple trees, and you just pick up the apple trees. You cannot give the instructions like that. There's a certain set of intuition that you need to walk in the forest and to see, oh, there's this one is ripe, and you know where that one is. And so there needs to be also a shift in mentality. And that's why I think like psychology is important in that, but it's not that far reaching. Like everyone can grasp this, because you can just go with one of those forests and the guy explains to you, and you get it straight away, because it is logical, but not predetermined logic. Like it's not like in a monoculture where you have this, like everything has to be in biggest quantity. You need to make as much as possible, which is all capitalism. But
Yeah, and you have to
within
have
this
a certain
structure,
size, the certain, look and feel to the, otherwise, oh, it's an ugly fruit, it's not going to sell, and this and that. What the hell? I've talked to many different vendors and farmers markets in the south of France and out here in Brittany, which is a pretty big agricultural area, which is funny because it's more expensive here than down south. And down south it's more toward, where I was living is by the coastal area. But yeah, it's incredible how people got to jump through hoops and this and that just to get certified organic and pay at least 5,000 euros to go through that process of being certified organic. A good amount of people are just, they don't want to use pesticides. They understand and they feel the effects. I mean, people that are using hands-on pesticides, cultivators, agricultures, gardeners, it's like they can start to feel, not even long-term effects, but short-term effects, and they don't want to, in good conscience, sell, these contaminated fruits and vegetables. So they're gonna go under the radar. They're gonna certify themselves as organic, but they're gonna say, "Oh, we didn't use any pesticides. It's technically organic." And it's who the hell type of institutional governmental body said like, "Oh, organic is like some special thing now, and like anything else is just like it's food." Like, no, nothing outside of organic needs to be certified as anything else, right? Doesn't that feel a little messed up?
Yeah, and I think that's why it's also important that people know really where their food, that they're connecting with the person that grew it. Like a lot of people, they don't know their, like, that's good that you go to a farmer's market, because you're connecting with the farmers and you're knowing like what they're doing with their products. A lot of people, they don't really know where their food is coming from. They just go to the grocery stores and just get the straight away, like the
It's
easiest
all
way,
there, like people are so disconnected towards the whole chain of, how from the seed to the root to the blooming of the flowers and the fruit and the vegetables to the whatever transportation it's going to go to, in the process to that, up until you buy it in their grocery store, you know, and in the
Yeah.
marginalization of, and like, how many suicide farmers have been suicided themselves, you know,
Mm.
even before the Monsanto thing. I mean, these people, they work their lives off 7 days a week for the most part. They don't really get that much money at the same time.
No. No. Yeah, they get a lot less when they start a food forest. They actually make more money. That's why I think this shift is going to happen, because it's just
Okay.
benefiting for farmers as well as nature.
Yeah, and
And
that's
that's the
what, yeah, I
symbiotic.
was hoping you'd say something like that too. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah,
I know there's better ways to be more, I guess, financially better off, you know, instead of just going off of these old, archaic, economical, agricultural, industrialized, you know, processing of foods, you know, and growing them, and yeah.
yeah, and in regards to like the permaculture, because I think like some people will be shocked, like, okay, food forest, there's nothing close here, and I don't have the space of land to start something like that. And so it will be for some people like, whoa, that will be appalling. Like, that's not for me, for my location. And to those people, I would say like, start out small, you know, like with these food forests. It's just having this awareness of growing your own food. Like if you have a balcony, like there are certain ways, if you can do it just straight out on 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 stones, like on a pathways, you can start out like, oh,
Yeah.
grow your own food in certain way, like creating lasagnas with layers of like compost, which you can buy for very cheaply from your local government. And so there's a lot of ways, like you can even grow certain plants inside as well that give certain food. So it's just this awareness of just connecting back with what you're going to eat, and then you will feel that it's not just food for your body but also for your spirit as well. Like I was struggling with IBS, you know, I had irritable bowel syndrome, and I had a lot of like big symptoms of my stomach setting up like a big stomach, and was hurting. I got a lot of cramps, and now I don't have that as much.
Great,
I have
man.
it a lot, like I still have it a little bit, but it like it got less and less, because this conscious awareness of just knowing, like my father has a food garden, so that helps. He does it still in a classical sense, so there's still like he feeds it with compost, but it's not like he doesn't use any pesticide or anything. Like if something gets eaten, that's it. But it doesn't use any, like he does use, like for example, eggshells, and there's some event things you can invent to prevent insects from reaching it. But what permaculture acknowledges is that you cannot really totally abolish nature. You just need to make it work for you. And so there's still always some plants that are some fruits that will be eaten by insects, but that will feed the cycle that you need to keep growing the system that you have. And so you have this shift of like working against it and then working with it. Like, you know, here there's a lot of weeds and people are like fighting away with weeds. Oh, there's more weeds coming out, and you keep on working, you know. But
Hey,
when
what
people
kind of
throw in
weeds? We're talking
salt and
about dandelion and plantain, because those are great for the body and the brain.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
many, yeah, no, many plants that actually grow as weeds are actually really useful, and actually they're native plants, so they're very strong. They warm 1 year. So what these weeds are doing, they're actually repairing the soil. So they're what where if you have a certain food garden, you're keeping your soil in a pioneering state. So the plants they're growing to make their fulfillment, and then follow down, and then create more and more layers. Eventually, like stronger, more long-term placed plants have enough food to sustain, and so this is how that works. But we're keeping it in that state. So a lot of this soil is now exposed to sunlight, and so the soil is drying out. A lot of microorganisms don't get enough food. Like you can see the quality of your soil by the amount of worms that you have in your soil. If you dig out a little bit of earth and you see a lot of worms, that's a good indicator. And so in
Oh,
these soils, that they don't have that as much. because they need that, the constant scraping of the surface. But the deeper soil, they don't really get that supplement. So a lot of this is something I really need to mention. A lot of civilizations in the past actually got demolished, that destroyed because of this. Even the Romans, the Greeks, the Chinese, many civilizations, they all growth in this monoculture, in this sense of keeping the soil in a pioneering state, but eventually you'll make it a desert. And so a lot of even Egyptians, a lot of soils eventually got disrupted because the soil would not preserved. And that's why the food forest sounds very like exotic and something that's never done before, but actually this is something that nature already forms itself. If you go to Kenya, in some places in Africa, or even in South America where you've been as well, there's many plants in there. If you know, like in these days you have the shamans that has most of the knowledge of that, but a lot of plants in there can be eaten if you know how to, like even the plants of ayahuasca, and knew in which way to take it. But you have to have that communication. I think that's why I'm focusing now on the plant knowledge, because a lot of it gets lost. And it's just it's sad, like my generation. I'm like, I was talking with this guy of this course, and was saying like a lot of older women were interested in this field, and but there were only a few guys, people like from my age. They're all like technology, and even had a discussion with one of my good friends who also research a lot, but he's more into like crypto, and I also invested in crypto, so I don't have anything against that. But if you're only putting in energy into that, and money into that, that will not save us. Like it's another attempt to become decentralized from the central banks, but it's not something you can hold. Like, what will make you really independent? Well, that's having your own material, your own house, your own food, your own electricity. These are things ultimately that will be the best of investment. And that's not only for yourself. You can eventually, if you have enough, you have abundance, which is some of the ethical basis of permaculture. Once you have abundance, you share it with others. And that's why I think also permaculture is so crucial in creating this change. Once you, like, if I, people will not take me seriously, but if I give them some food, and I have some conversation with them, and they're like, oh, this guy provides me with some food. So let's hear what he has to say, and then you can build up these bridges. You can connect with your community, and you can involve people to. That's something that I'm pursuing. Is like, start out small. That's the main thing. Like, if you have a smart little garden, you can create certain plants and guilds and companionships within plants that work together. That also can look nice. Like, it doesn't have to be just purely functional. But you can walk into a garden and you can eat what is there. And it doesn't, like, if you just have a few plants, if you're this is a movement, man. This is a move. I'm trying to like spark even some of my friends just to start some small little gardens. And like, it started out small, but once you have an abundance of food, a lot of problems I think will be solved, because a lot of it is coming down to a scarcity belief, in this fear that I don't have too much tomorrow. So why would I share not just materials, but also sharing what I've learned with other people, because they might abuse the knowledge that I've learned against me. So I think a lot of things tying it together, but it's not, permaculture is not some absolute answer, but I do think it's a part of the solution, tying it in with the psychology and yeah, the heart-based intelligence, and what you said as well. And like, it's an integration, man. It's a process. Don't it's not an utopia that I'm presenting here. It's more
But
of a
it's
bitopia.
therapeutic at the same time. I mean, as far as like, one of the solutions for mankind is to really reconnect with nature and harmonize with nature. And practices like permaculture and just like any kind of segue or, yeah, practice or thing like just digging your hands in the dirt, as, a lot of kids did, when we were much younger and this and that, and just trying to discover this reality and experience things and taste different things, like get our
Yeah,
hands, dirty with whatever, and feel into the environment and where we're living at and where we are and how we relate to everything. And who we, yeah.
Yeah, and it's also like people don't need to be afraid to try new things out. It's just experiment. That's the thing about this permaculture. Don't expect that it will be perfectly working, because in nature, even like some plants, they die out, they don't get enough sun, and there's a lot of probabilities in there. And so, just enjoy the process. That's the most important thing. If you enjoy the process, you enjoy doing it, then that's already a form of success. Don't like, that's why I would call myself a process philosopher. I'm not aiming for that success that somewhere out there that society is promising me along the line. No, I'm looking for something that gives me fulfillment in the moment, and something that I enjoy the process of doing. And I like going into nature. I always like, when I was a small little child, there were two big topics on school there which I enjoyed, was history and it was biology. So I
Mm.
always was learning about nature is for me always very interesting, and also learning about people, about their history, about different cultures. Uh, but there's so many things out there we can learn about that. So yeah, no, just for me, if there's things to learn, I'm already enjoying myself, and there's always that's the like the backup line. If you have a fucking fucked up experience in your life, you always learn about it. You always learn from it. There's always things
Either
that
easy or
that
the
you need to
hard way,
consider.
it's like hopefully people understand and pick up on, the lessons to be learned on their mistakes, or just the unfortunate situation that, they got placed in. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah. So,
Yeah, maybe that's a good place to like. Do you have any questions still, or whatever? Do you
um,
for a roundup?
yeah, I guess to cap it off, man, like you touched on so many great points and really interesting, deep philosophical and geological, historical aspects of a lot of stuff, especially, coming from the Netherlands and everything. And honestly, your English is really damn good.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hell yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I also
definitely
speak.
appreciate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, you good? What did you want to say?
Oh no, I also speak a little bit Spanish as well because of my girl. I always had a fascination with language, and that's
Mm.
also one of my big focuses in philosophy itself. Is the what is the like what is the most fundamental in root of language? What is a universal language? And that precedes like words. It's even like symbolism is much closer to that, but I think it eventually stems down to silence and just the appreciation and attentiveness of other people. And if you have that connection, if you already have that awareness, then you can listen from that end to people, and eventually, like, you're gonna learn language really quickly because you're emphasizing with them. Like, language is communication, it's community, it's coming together, it's this common ground. And so that's why I think language is so important, because if we're misunderstanding certain words on how we're
Yeah.
using it, then it's already we can create this entire discussion just based upon our misunderstanding, which is very unfortunate because I think there's a lot of things to talk about, and there's a lot more things to do than talk. That's also needs to be emphasized. But like, do things first. I would say think about it first, maybe feel about it first, then think about it, then do it, and then reflect on it. Like I
Yeah,
and
totally. Yeah, I mean, like,
maybe adjust or whatever if need
how
be.
do how do we express language? Like how the vibration from my vocal cords, with the breath coming through my lungs out of my mouth, that's vibration, right? And even without that, if we're really connected, to source, on the higher frequencies of, our true, authentic, multidimensional selves, like we wouldn't even need language. We would just be able to feel into one another more or less. We could, like telepathically speak to each other without even using words, more or less, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, sometimes words get in the way, and whatever limited vocabulary and understanding of actual words and the etymology behind words actually have sometimes between individuals, so
Yeah,
it's a tricky thing. And like non-violent communication is where it's at, and people need to understand communication is also half listening, half speaking as well, and just having patience and having an open heart, mind, and ear towards others, and really having their discernment up and ready to take on what's coming at them.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I like with competitive language, it evolves through metaphor, something that we cannot really explain with the regular words that we have. We have to use certain things that are like what we're trying to describe. And
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
them
Limited
called
language is limited in many different languages. Like in Dutch, I'm sure there's, you know, words and terms that explain things really accurately that even the English language really can't, you know, explain even in a sentence sometimes or whatever. Or it just
Mhm.
sounds awkward or it's not equivalent towards the same feeling and meaning of, you know, that expression, if you will. You know, it could, you know, talk about that with any between any different languages, you know, but
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, language is key, man. Language is a science that encompasses all other sciences.
yeah, we got to get to define things and how we're going to be able to read
It's
the
definitely
rhyme with the
fascinating, man.
reason, right? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's still like even like something that Heidegger pointing towards is that it's not the scientists or the philosophers that are explorers of consciousness, but it's actually the poets, the people that invent new words. And by expanding our vocabulary, we are raising our awareness of life itself. And that's something that also deeply connected with, and also Trans McKenna. And I have a book here with by Julian James, was a psychologist, also again with the two hemispheres and how it uses languages. But I think it's something that's also in language is universal. It's something that we just need to develop ourselves to be able to perceive what is actually out there. And so that requires some vocabulary, and that's something that like language is not something that's deaf. You know, if you study etymology, you know that language is always evolving, and so we're using words now totally different than we using when it was invented. And it's also due to our relationship with that word and our associations with them, and the set context that surrounds that word. And so language is always alive. You know, we're using it to 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 explain things that are always changing. And so language also is something that needs to be changing if we're able to connect with nature or connect with reality, and also connect with each other on that same level that we experience. Because a lot of things, like, you know, like with mystical experiences, you cannot almost not explain those types of things, so you have to tell it in like
yeah,
stories
it's
or
hard to articulate.
poetic.
But as far as like language evolving and certain words evolving, I mean, like with etymology, like the meaning, we can talk about casting spells, you know, spelling words and this and that, and the whole black magic or even white magic behind that. You know, there's the dualistic sides of some of these things, right? Yeah, there's been certain terms and words that have been perverted and inverted on purpose. They haven't evolved. Some of them have actually devolved, actually, you know, so to our misfortune, more or less, you know.
Yeah, sure. Like language is now used more in a manipulative manner. Like we use language more to manipulate, but it can also be used to heal. And so it's always double sided. You know, like, you can definitely put people aside and mislead them, but you can also give them a clear perspective on themselves. And that's something that I'm hoping that my language is aimed at, is to explain the world better, and thereby also being able to heal myself, because healing is a completion, you know, like trying to build a bond with life itself. And by doing so, there's a certain intimacy with life, and that yeah, it gives it a lot of meaning, and that meaning is already like fulfilling, and doesn't require me to go to every party or drink as much alcohol as I can. But it's just, you know, you can reach it in any moment. If people are looking for love and looking for meaning outside of themselves, you can keep on looking because you will not find it there. Like love is something that's on, like it doesn't. I don't know. Think about this, but I don't think you need somebody else to experience love. Like love is something that is just inherent. Like that's if we're building a house, we're using stone. If we're building ourselves, we're using love. But love, of course, has different dimensions. People using the word love in a different manner. So I have to talk about what I mean with love. But love is not is eternal. So it's what came before and what comes after.
Totally.
It's the glue that and the ties that pull everyone together. Even if they don't realize it, even though they're in a fearful state, there's always this level of love that can always be tapped into, and we can extend that to other people. But we don't find it inner to ourselves. There will always be this lack that we're trying to fill up. You know.
Well, yeah, if someone can't love themselves, they really cannot truly love anyone else outside themselves, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and that's all. Yeah, it goes back to really healing oneself and making someone whole, part of that holistic logistics, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I like that term.
with
Yeah.
that said,
It's
man,
good.
yeah. Honestly, Jasper, fucking, let's wrap it up. I'm gonna leave you with the last words. Is there anything you wish to share, declare? We're gonna leave all the links and everything as far as your
Yeah,
works.
yeah. Well, I would like to give some reflection. I'm hoping that people could follow me in what I was saying, because at some moments I did go a little bit quick, and for me there's a whole like big web on how all these subjects are connected, and there's so many things I could
so much
expand upon
connected.
a lot more. Uh, but it's yeah, no, for sure. Like it's all connected, and about like I'm teacher assistant in my background, so I do have some didactical background. So I always have to be aware of where my public is at. So yeah, I'm hoping to connect with your community, with the holistic logistics community, and just check on
Oh, nice.
people
Getting
how they
off the
receive it.
ground.
And yeah, I'm always open for any feedback, and people that think differently from me. I'm openly inviting them to share them and do it in a constructive manner. Then I'm also a person that has the shortcomings, so definitely, yeah, I'm hoping that some things that I said is to any meaning to somebody that listen to it, and yeah, provide them some healing if they require it. So and yeah, like the same, it works both ways, like it helps me also to clear my own mind. So yeah, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for this opportunity. And it's my first time being on somebody else's podcast. And if people want to check out my stuff, then they're open, and yeah, they're welcome, and then also on there, like leave back some feedback. I'm really missing on that stuff out, and it's very important for growth to get feedback. So people have something to say, or they know somebody that's interesting for the podcast, or yeah, like they can show some creative outlets that they have. I was releasing some of my poetry on Instagram last couple of days. I have This is
Cool.
one of the first times doing that, so a little bit tricky, but yeah, really do think it's important that we show our vulnerable sides, and become honest and authentic and genuine, and hoping that people receive me in that manner.
Oh yeah, brother. Man, I love what you've been doing, the intention behind it, and the fact, and the drive and the motivation, and the multifaceted paths that you're going on, and like how you're really sticking to a certain higher path above all else, but at the same time just gaining so much experience from a lot of different things, man. Like that's really inspiring for me and other people that are listening, hopefully. So yeah, it's been really a pleasure and honor to have you on, and
Awesome.
you killed it tonight, man. Honestly, pretty blown away by what you said tonight. So yeah,
Awesome.
much love.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Let me know if I need to send so many of the links, things that I mentioned. Like I don't remember all of them, so if you
yeah, I was trying to write
let
down
me
some
know.
notes, so we'll talk later.
All right,
You know.
awesome. All right. All right, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you
Eternal
too,
love.
and thank you all for listening, and take it easy out there. Peace.
Oh yeah, all that, and I didn't even introduce how we met and how we've been in contact, because yeah, apparently he's I mean, I have my other YouTube channel, AwakenYaMind, that does, truth infused music mixes, if you will, and yeah, I've been checking that out for a year, a couple, or something like that. And the fact he lives in Europe and I'm in France, he was visiting or passing through France for a little bit, and yeah, he stopped by actually last October 2020, and yeah, he stayed at my place for a good 4 nights or something like that, and yeah, it was cool. It was right when he was really starting his own podcast and everything, and so we were able to kind of share ideas and listen to a lot of music and this and that. So yeah, that was really cool. So yeah, in light of that, I'm gonna leave you all with a little music for the outro, and yeah, peace.
Yeah, right on. They say stick to what you do best, so I'm back to carrying the European West on my back, and it ain't broke, so won't fix it. Especially since I know my focus gon' miss it. About to visit, staying on route, giving all of my beautiful people everywhere a shout. Without being explicit, Pete, Philly, and Perquisite needed a timeout. Now I'm solo like before, making my own beats, choosing my own chords, taking my own path, writing my own score, learning some new math, building my own store. And it's so much more than this music thing I so adore. So I just said later, I'm doing me theater, ain't gonna hear my tunes no more. But that was acting or reacting to something that turned sour in the midday hour. But I won't let it tower above me, love me, hate me, gave me power. I've crossed the ocean, I've traveled the seas, getting a bit closer to where I should be. I know I'm supposed to let my mind ease, please. Every verse that I spit is just another piece of my puzzle, and I admit, despite all of my wit, I'm puzzled. I stay tussling, trying to come to grips. My church has no religion, my search has no fine. Since the birth of mankind, we've been trying to move forward while pressing rewind, and I'm no better, a lazy go-getter, conservative trendsetter, rebel without a vendetta. The blueprint to happiness, I will follow it to the letter. But since it ain't, I'ma make my own and meditate in the middle of the danger zone.